Smart. My name is Thelma Kwe. I'm the facilitator for this session. Good afternoon. It gives me so much pride to welcome our moderator for this session. We are already fast spent behind time. I'm not going to take too much of your time, so I will just introduce to you our moderator. The name of our moderator is Eugene Anangwe. He's the CEO of TV47. Please welcome him with a round of applause. He'll take us through the session for strategies for African smart cities. Thank you.
Yes, how are you? Are you okay? Should we let you go out for lunch? I have also not had lunch, but it's understandable. So I think we need to take as little time as possible for us to get started with our session this evening. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe, and it's a pleasure to actually be here today. For the first time, I have actually, I don't know if most of you here used to watch RoboCop. So for the first time, I saw a real robot actually face-to-face speaking in a human way. So it's a pleasure actually being here for this particular summit. So before we get even deeper into the conversation today, I would like us to first be given a sort of background of what we are going to be having, or we will benchmark on the following presentation. I don't know if I'm audible enough. I'm hearing my voice going lower. So the sound team, kindly work on that. So I want to introduce our keynote speaker, who's going to help us with a presentation that will set the tone for our conversation today. And he's none other than Ian Marsh. He's the Director and CTO, Career Business Group at Huawei. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes to give us the keynote address. We can do better than that, eh? Come on, another round of applause. Yes.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come in talk to us here about Smart City. As was just introduced, I think the best thing I can do is quickly go through the slides. We've got a slightly truncated session today due to various other reasons, and I thought it would be useful to try and set the scene. So when I started off, I thought, what is a smart city? So I, Googled a couple of definitions. And the one on the left really is from Technopedia. And I thought that was a pretty weak definition of a smart city. Really, it's just about enhanced quality and performance of urban services such as energy, transportation, and utilities. Well, that's not a smart city, I don't think. I think there's a lot more smart things that can be put in a city than that. And then I looked at the EU definition. And of course, as Britain, we're having a little bit of difficulty with the EU at the moment, trying to achieve escape velocity, mainly actually with our own people. And I actually think that's a really good definition there, because it covers a much wider view. Sorry, I keep moving my hand. A much wider view about the environment, about living, mobility, governance, economy, and people. And I think that gives you a much wider view of what a smart city can do. I mean, the bottom line is, these days, I think we have enough technology now for it not to be an issue within the smart city. Technology is not the problem. It's about what you want to do with the technology. And I think possibly some of you will be able to put these slides up on the website, ultimately. So quickly, a few case studies. And I'm going to rapidly go through these. In China, mobile finance. Now, I know Africa's really big on mobile finance in some areas, but not in others. But, that's helped something like 120% growth, much more efficient, 4 times the capital turnover. In ICT, 70% of things are online. Even in the rural environment, 70% of fresh fruit now is bought online in China. Now, that, to me, is a smart economy and something that the smart city might be as well to think about. When you look at Singapore, 98% of government services are now online, with 5,000 plus SMEs using the iSprint system, and education, 100 schools and 50 applications. So again, a very smart evolution to a city. Now, Singapore's a city-state. It's much smaller than Africa, and it's much smaller even than Rwanda. So But I think the thing that's important here is, cloud spending's improved, not improved, had to go up. IoT spending has gone up, and data spending has got to go up. Well, that's probably some of the things that everyone worries about. The spending has got to go up. But what that's doing is bringing on and pulling through all the savings that can be related to the smart city. If you've got 400 government e-services on board, think of the paper and the postage saving you're making just on that alone. So there's some things there to think about. I think when we look at Kenya, a bit closer to home, just the Safe City initiative in Kenya alone has improved international visitors because the crime rate came down. The first thing you do these days, the first thing I do is when I'm asked to go to a country, I have a quick look at the Foreign Office website and see how safe it is. And certainly, if I have to come for business, that's one thing. If I have to come for leisure, then I might take a different view about whether I want to go to that country if it's unsafe. I think, this slide is tempting fate, actually, with the national image improvement, VIP visits, 0 casualties. I mean, that I think is a tempting fate position. But the whole thing is about a long-term safe environment, detecting criminals 24/7, data retention and real-time police location, knowing those things and making the environment very safe. I think the other country that's making huge steps forward, and is just around the corner here, their stand, and they didn't know I was going to talk about this. I did tell them I was going to talk about it once I got here. But is Estonia. So Estonia, the map's a bit pixelated from where I'm standing and my poor eyesight, but is right in the north of Europe there. Part of the EU, 1.3 million people with a relatively young population, but they're real pathfinders in investment and what they've done with their smart city concepts. So, they've got 99% of their services on e-government, 95% on e-tax. Everyone in the country has a digital ID now. They've got public safety, half the number of deaths by accident over the last 20 years. So, tangible, real advantages of having a smart city. And that's not the only slide. The next slide is e-residency, building a new digital nation across the world. Everyone can be in Estonia, but not necessarily physically there. The data embassy is a really interesting example. So they've actually used everything. They're so reliant on their data now to run their country that they've actually had to use embassies in friendly countries to actually store their data, because if the Estonian website goes down, they're dead. So they've got all that in a different country. And I think it's a really far-sighted, visionary approach to what I would consider to be a smart city concept. So I thought about trying to quickly summarize this, and rather than just go for the standard summary, this is what I've told you, etc., I thought it would be quite interesting to see what's happened in Shenzhen. So Shenzhen's where Huawei's headquarters is based, and they've done this unified planned traffic system. And I think really the summary statement is from this chap, Chen Dongping, Dean of the Shenzhen Smart City Institute. And he said, without an integrated city-level digital platform, there's no smart city or digital government. And I think actually, for me, that encapsulates the summary of what I've been trying to say. So thank you for your time, and I'll now let the panelists discuss, as they say in educational circles.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for setting the tone for this important conversation. And so allow me to call upon our panelists for this important conversation. And I'll start off with Eric Torres, who's actually the head of India IoT Solutions, Tata Communications, Transformation Services. Let's give him a round of applause. Yes, yes. Also, you can have a seat. Allow me also to call on set Diba Babakar, who's the Senior VP and Managing Director, Africa ITRAN. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Also, allow me to welcome Patrick Nsenga Buchana, who's the CEO, AC Group. Let's give him a round of applause. Also allow us to have Anne Elvire Esmel, who is the Director, Strategic Partnerships at ADS. Our friends at the back are not clapping. All right, so allow me to also call upon our last panelist, Lorenzo Di Pietro, Executive Director of Entrepreneurship, Enterprise and Innovation, Barcelona City Council. Of course, it's a conversation that is very timely. Thank you so much for making time to be on this particular set. It pains my heart to see such a panel looking the way it looks. Those who are gender sensitive know what I'm talking about. But I know that we can do better as far as bridging the digital divide is concerned and having more ladies than men, or even having equal numbers. So welcome to this particular panel. We're going to be talking about this issue of the smart cities. Some have called them smart villages. And where I come from, my mother taught me well that the ladies go first. And so I'm going to start with you, Annie. Just talk to us a bit about the definition from where you sit. We've heard from our keynote speaker, who gave us various definitions. But if you were given a chance to rewrite the dictionary and give the word smart cities a definition, what would that definition look like, in your opinion?
Thank you, Eugene. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I think I will go into two directions.
Yes.
From a very basic perspective, the smart concept is a management concept. It's about connecting objects and people to improve the management of the city. So it's really connected to urban planning and the overall management of flows, people, to ensure efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
It's very relevant in the case of crisis, specific problem, accidents, etc. And this is the way it has been modeled, in many places. And it's still relevant when we're looking at the African context.
Yeah.
Now, what I would like to talk about is that smart is also about intelligence. In French, we would say ville et village intelligent. And I think intelligence is the ability to act in a relevant way when you're facing some specific challenges. So I would like to talk about flexibility and adaptability, because basically, the fundamentals of the smart city, of the smart village, it's about gathering people together, and they're developing some economic opportunities and economic activity to continue and to help the community thrive and grow. That's the point, So if you're not looking at, adapting the services and the technologies to the opportunities on the ground, and I'm giving a very basic example. If we're talking about smart village, what you're going to propose in an area with farmers is going to be very different from what you propose in an area with fishermen. And if you want to cut and paste the concept, the model, everywhere without thinking, you're just going to create undue competition between urban areas or villages, all doing the same, and just killing the economic activity. And the problem is that this is what people need to live. And this is the real focus we should have in Africa. As I was saying, earlier yesterday, the matter is not about having sexy houses, connected, nice color street light. It's about helping people to be self-sustained. Yeah. And we have to think about that. So adaptability, that's the key way. You need a brain behind the machine, always.
Right, adaptability, and of course, not leaving anyone behind, and not just about the smartness and the beauty of the city. I see Lorenzo wants to just chip in, since he's seated close to you, and allow you to do that.
Thanks. I really agree with the definition that she made, because also in our vision, Barcelona City Vision, the smart city is that city in which people can really live according to high levels of quality of life. That city in which people can live and work comfortably, with a sustainable mobility model, with an affordable housing model, with a healthy environment and circular. So really the smart city or smart village or smart place is that place in which, designed and created taking citizens' needs as the center, taking into account citizens' needs and priorities. That's the smart city. Then technologies and infrastructure, of course, are necessary, but I think it's not the core of the concept.
Right. Switch off the mics and then let's come to Patrick. Patrick, your company has been hailed for actually what we see in Rwanda today when it comes to public transport movement, the convenience, the tap and go system. I would like you to share with us when it comes to matters mobility and the smart village, smart city concept. I come from Kenya, and having lived in Rwanda for the last 11 years, and now back to Kenya, there's a big difference when you hit the road, especially when it comes to traffic jam. You can spend longer hours on the traffic than the ones you spend while you're traveling on air coming to Kenya. Talk to us a bit about the whole concept and how it can be adapted to fit into this whole smart city concept that we're talking about today.
Thank you, Jin, and thanks for having me. I think smart cities have been spoken about generally, but AC Group has found just one component within the whole smart city framework, which is smart transport. And this is important for us, but also for our continent, because African cities are becoming more and more populous. As you said, Eugene, a flight from here to Nairobi is about 1 hour and 20 minutes. The road trip from the airport, Jomo Kenyatta, to Nairobi CBD is about 2 to 3 hours, if you're lucky. And that's because of the traffic jam. But as you know, the keynote speaker showed us, there's one side of the road with maybe 100 cars. In those 100 cars, you could find 120 people in there. If you had the same illustration with buses, you would only need 3 buses. So you can imagine 3 buses on a 3-lane road. So our job is to create innovations around public transport. And so the first step was to innovate around the payments, which is help buses collect all their money. And then secondly, collect data and help them make decisions, both on the side of the bus operators, but also on the side of government. Kigali is now working on public transport 2.0, which is entirely based on the data that we've collected over the last 3 to 4 years with the tap and go solution. And public transport 2.0 is now looking at schedules. We have devices on the bus that could help people on the tap and go app see how far the next bus is. And with this, you're able to plan your journey. But most importantly, adding other components like cameras, sensors that reduce overloading, but most importantly also guarantee security of children and women, which is not a very big issue here in Rwanda, but it's an issue in certain other bigger cities. And so we're looking at innovating and creating an efficient public transport system that's reliable, but also gives us the chance to change the mindset. Because when you look at the heavily populated cities in Europe and in the US, they majorly rely on public transport. Even the rich and middle income use public transport. In Africa, unfortunately, we still have public transport seen as the means of transport for the poor. People who can't afford their vehicles, people who can't afford special hire. And without the change in mindset, then we will never see the need to improve and innovate around public transport. Thank you.
But just while you still have the microphone, a personal question. How often do you use public transport yourself?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Well, not very often,
Yeah.
but we have something at office where we have Friday with public transport, and
Yeah.
you don't use any other means of transport.
Yeah.
So wherever you have to go, whatever meeting you have to take, you have to use the bus.
Right.
And if you're finding it complicated, then you need to innovate and make it.
And from the solution. Thank you so much, Patrick. Let me talk to Diba before I come back to Eric. Diba, we come from African societies where, the rural area, has that feel, away from town, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And here we are, sometimes talking about even smart villages. Today, as we speak, things have changed. I mean, the village that my parents grew up in is not the same village. These days, there's electricity. The fireflies have become extinct. They're no longer there. And we're missing out or losing out on that cultural authenticity of our areas. How do we still create smart villages, or even smart cities for that matter, without losing that feel of, wow, this is the uniqueness of this city that we are not going to lose out even as we modernize?
Thanks, Eugene. Allow me first to come to what we, ITRON, think about how we define a smart city, because that's our basement. I would like to come back to what Ian was saying before. I think there's a little echo, but when you're having a smart city, it is for what? What do you want to do? If you look at the macro problem, a city is supposed to deliver a certain number of things to its population: infrastructure, water, electricity, for their well-being. And the aim of these smart cities is generally to, most in Africa, is to, yeah. All right, thanks. Hear me well? All right. So the aim of these smart cities tools and ultimately is to help to get quicker to that, to make people live better. So if I just want to get really concrete, what we've done in ITRON, and this will lead me to your question, is that we have partnered with different government and utilities in Mali, in Burundi, in Zambia, where we've worked particularly on the water scarcity and energy efficiency by implementing a certain number of solutions which helped to first reduce the level of losses, which means availing water or energy to the population, and second, give also much more profitability to the utilities to be able to expand. So if we want to have successful, cases or opportunities like a project we do have implemented in Miami, in Florida, it doesn't make sense in Africa. But today we have implemented a real project of a smart city, which is helping the utility in Burundi to improve the water access, where you're sure that the kids are going to have water in the morning to wash, and parents to cook, and just get the basics. So our aim is particularly to get that replicated on a smaller scale. So the problem is that when you talk about big cities like Nairobi, Kigali, it's on a large scale. So doing it for the smarter corners will necessitate, will have to request much more financing, which which wouldn't be the case for on a global perspective. So it will help you definitely to improve people's life. Yeah. What we're doing is that we're trying to make that visible, and we're doing it today on a discussion with ADS for Kigali here. And what we're trying to do is to have that happen in each corner.
Yeah, okay, it's back. And as you do that, there's an interesting thing that comes to mind. The communities, as far as mindset, as far as cultural values are concerned, how ready are they to adapt these changes that are coming up? Because I'll give you an example. We have communities in rural areas that still have a belief that if a lady is being brought, to be introduced as a wife or a bride, then they should be able to go to the well and fetch the water over their head and balance it over there. And if they're not able to do that, then that is not wife material. We still have, sadly, some communities like that. Now here we are bringing the water tanks and the pumps and all this in these homes. How ready are they to actually take this up and change their mindset and perceptions as far as what they believe is cultural and not?
I think you can still keep the dwell anyways, to get the bribe, go get the water. But she definitely would want to have water in her house running every day and electricity. Right? She may want as well to be having, any multi-application system available which will allow her to see what my friend on the left is doing with the buses, right? So we can keep our identity, our cultural identity, keeping who we are, but moving forward. The only problem is that we can't replicate what has been exactly been done in Europe or in the US in our countries. We need to take that in consideration strongly.
Right. And I'm going to come to you, but let me talk now to our friend here who's been waiting for the microphone, and finally it is here, Eric. Eric, your thoughts on what the panelists have already said, and how do we leapfrog as a continent as far as adapting to this whole concept is concerned?
What I'm hearing is music to my ears. Definitely. The emerging countries' smart cities have little to do with the developed countries' smart cities. They don't start from the same starting point. They don't have the same stock of capital. They don't have, and even the top applications are not the same. If I speak about India, when we implemented those smart cities, and we can discuss how do we do that, because there is barely an RFP saying I want a smart city. Okay, there is often an RFP saying I want to improve the water cycle, I want to improve the electricity grid, I want to improve energy efficiency, and so on. But if I speak about India, when we look at it, we realize very quickly we cannot copy anything of what was done in Europe or in US. Okay. Because we need also to self-finance the effort. And as was said by one of my colleagues, the goal of the city is also to make life of people easier. So with those two parameters, what could we do? And we realized very quickly, for example, smart street light is a top application because it is self-financed in 2 years, and then you save plenty of money. If we talk about how to ease the life of people, the water cycle, water scarcity is a top application. I mean, Jamshedpur is a city that is proud in India to say that you can drink the water at the tap, okay? But it's a full cycle, and you have to think about investment. But first, you implement, you measure, and then you see where you have to improve, okay?
Okay. And of course, when we're talking about the India model, for instance, let's talk about the financing issue, because it's a very important component here. We might all want things to be in a way that we want, but now how do we sustainably finance that? That's the issue now.
Well, it's exactly, you put a finger on exactly the problem, okay? Because even if you run what we call PPP, private-public partnership, after 3 years there is no money. So you have to find a model where you self-finance, so the application you put on the table, there is a market and people are ready to pay, or you save money. Okay, so again, back to the electricity and the smart lighting, where you save money. Honestly speaking, it's obvious. You save 80% of the energy in 2 years. There is no discussion, no doubt. If you come back to water, people are ready to pay. Okay, and I can speak from example. Water was free in India for the last payment for water was introduced the last 3 years. No one used to pay for water.
Free of charge.
Free of charge. Okay. Now, because of scarcity of water, they understand they have to pay. But if they pay, they want quality.
Mm-hmm. Consistency.
Consistency. Mm-hmm. And they are also, now in some region of India, you also have to put a cap to the level or the maximum water consumption you can have per day, okay, at some period, not during monsoon, but in the middle of winter, where there is not enough water, you may have a cap saying you have a family of 4, then you're going to get 200 liters a day, and that's it. So it is self-financed because then people understand they have to pay. Okay? If you come to electricity, improving the grid, we are using smart meters, but we are not using smart meters at all like in Europe. You know, you always have this belief that people will look at the smart meters and will save electricity. I'm not sure, okay? Definitively, having smart meters in India avoid, you know, the cost of reading the indexes. But the best usage of smart meter in India is to compare what you have purchased from the power plant or from the water tank or the water reservoir and what you have sold. Same with gas. Yeah. And daily, on a day-to-day, you know what you have purchased, what you have sold. Why is that? Because, for example, electricity, 25% of electricity is lost. And I put lost between quotes. Yeah. It's borrowed by other people that are not paying. You need to understand where it happens. Water, same. You know, you have leakage. But if you can save 25% of your water, it's hundreds of millions of people you deliver water. Okay? And it's exactly the way we are thinking, and we are developing that today. So application per applications to self-finance all of that and have a sustainable model.
Right. And this brings me to Patrick before I come to you. Okay, maybe
If
you might forget it. Yes, go ahead.
Just
yes.
a quick one.
Yes.
I would like to emphasize strongly what he's saying with a real case which happened here in the neighbor's country. We have, in the dynamic of implementing a smart city project in Bujumbura, the next capital here,
yes,
we have what we call a non-revenue water project running with the utility. When we started 3 years ago, on average, the utility was estimating its losses around 52%. Can you imagine you're running a company and what 50, let me just be schematic, like 50% of what you're injecting is lost. We've implemented a project which is running today, and after 3 years, we've reduced the losses of 12%. And
12%.
12%, which means it's the money available for the water utility, which means it's the water available for the population. And guess what?
What stopped you from reducing that number to 50%?
Come again?
Reducing the level of the losses.
Yeah.
You only reduced to 12%.
I mean,
Now,
okay,
what I'm asking now is the hurdles that probably you're facing in actually fully going full-blown in your solution.
What, if I don't get you well.
The challenges.
The challenges,
yes.
Okay. Look, the first challenge we had was the financing.
Yes.
And this is a good partnership. That's not a PPP, but that's a partnership we had with the government of Burundi.
Yes.
And we had the same in Mali and another one in Benin, which was backed up by the African Development Bank.
Yeah.
But what I would like to say with that is that the main challenge is generally the financing.
Yeah.
But when the utilities or the cities generally have the will to make it happen, they find a kind of ecosystem partner,
yeah,
you know, where you can implement it. What we've done on the water, we are going to do it exactly the same on the electricity.
Right.
This is just to state, what I wanted to emphasize before that is that all that we've done today, despite the fact that there's a lot of rurality in Bujumbura, most of the meters, most of the grid is smart today. And this is giving a lens to the municipality, to the government to say, hey, the next stage is going to be, you know, smart city but on a Bujumbura way.
Right. Those who are joining us right now, thank you for making time to come in. In a short while, we'll be passing the microphones to you to just ask your questions or give your contributions. But before we come to you, I wanted to talk to Patrick and then go to Anne. Patrick, what Diba was talking about is quite familiar. It's something that you've heard about, especially when it comes to the drivers or the owners of some of the buses here that today can celebrate or can afford a smile because of the tap and pay system, which is cashless. Before, when we had we call them conductors, those who are moving with picking the money in the buses, sometimes they would incur very much a lot of losses because the money would not reach the owners of these buses. But you also provide free internet in these public buses. And this comes to this concern. How do you sustain this business? You're offering for free. I know people say there's no free lunch. How do you sustain this? How do you make sure that this is a sustainable solution that will not reach a point where you cannot be able to continue giving out?
Sure. So, the Wi-Fi in the bus, which is thank you. Wi-Fi in the bus, which is called Tap and Go Wi-Fi, today is connected in all buses in Kigali with quite a huge number of users. And much as it's close to free, there's just a small fee that is embedded.
So that confirms my point. There's no free lunch, eh?
There's no free lunch indeed. But it's a small fee that if you compare with what someone gets and the experience they have while connecting to 4G Wi-Fi on the bus, it's almost free. But this is all in a bid to create an environment inside the bus that's comfortable. And it's in a bid to trying to change mindset and say, you know, public transport is good for everyone. It's safe, it's convenient, and you'll enjoy your experience. The only other thing that we need to add on is then the schedule, where I look and we can promise a passenger that, you know, when you get to the bus stop, within the next 5 minutes there'll be a bus going to your destination. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. So this is the country. If you want to Netflix and chill in the bus, Rwanda is the place. Huh? Anne, I want you to hear your thoughts. What are you hearing so far here?
I wanted first to react on your comment about how to convince local communities to adopt this concept. I think there are two major facts that we should not neglect. First, the role of the younger generation in terms of explaining and playing a role. You know, that pedagogy to the elderly to explain, well, that makes sense to go into that direction. And also the fact that it's not necessarily, you know, the best thing for people to migrate and to go live in cities and especially on coastal areas. When you think about the situation in some of the big cities in Western Africa, you have some places that are just terrible to live in. We're talking about real slum, you know. And it's also painful to leave the place where you have been, where you were born and you've been raised. And so the fact of bringing opportunities where people are, you know, this also has a positive impact when you explain. But the key thing, of course, is to discuss, explain, and ensure that you meet people's need. They appropriate the idea, and then maybe they are more ready to pay for the services, as Eric said, but it's very important. And I think you know, we've seen positive feedbacks when we enter into this type of dialogue. So this should be definitely part of the process. Regarding financing, you know, it's about the way you structure the opportunity. You can work app by app, but the fact is that generally, you know, there are some common features in these villages or smart cities in terms of waste management, water management, energy, electricity access. And then there are many things, you know, fitting the specific requirements and local opportunities that exist, which means that you can bring together more partners. And you bring more partners, you bring more money, private money also, that's important, and you de-risk the project. So this is something very important. We're looking into this. ADS via its subsidiary Solectra is one of the founding members of the Global Alliance for Smart Cities and Smart Village, which has been announced at the One Planet Summit in Nairobi mid-March. And this is precisely the idea. You know, try to bring in the best skills and competences and commitment from people who can identify on a given project a relevant opportunity for them. But when we're talking to governments, if we see the opportunity to scale up, you know, then it's win-win for everyone. And the opportunity is just huge because most of the African population still live in rural areas today. So there are solutions, there are new ways to consider and to address the financing problem. It's not only B2C or full G finance with concessional loans, etc. We can think differently, we are thinking differently, and we are testing models that are proving to be successful. So we look into that direction. We should not be stuck to the ancient ways of thinking. Now we are proving that we can deliver differently.
We can deliver differently. Lorenzo, talk to me a bit about the challenges. We all know the coin always has two sides, unless if someone has reinvented the third side. Two sides in the sense that we have the good and also we have the challenges. Talk to us a bit about the risks, potential challenges of adapting and plugging into the smart cities. Some people say it will raise inequality because, you know, with digital innovation and all that, we have a population that is illiterate and might not be able to access these kind of services. Share with us what your thoughts are on this.
For me, that's the point. So in the moment when you are thinking about how smart city concept can help a city, can help a village, I think you have to take into your mind two main elements that in the panel some colleagues they have already commented. First one is citizenship engagement. It's critical because I think that smart city is not something that the city gives to people and is there. No, smart city is dynamic. Is when you find the right solution for a social challenge, for example, for a social priority, water or something else, then really people has to be able to use it and to believe that that's the way to solve their problem. In that sense, the involvement, the engagement of citizenship for me is critical, both in the conception, in designing the smart city, but also in the implementing of it, because finally people have to be able to actively participate in this smart city.
What do you do in a situation where the citizens believe that my leader knows best what is good for me? What do you do in such a scenario then? I mean, where citizens just believe in what the leaders say and what the leaders decide to do. How do you deal with this then?
Sorry again?
Like you have a scenario where you've said that citizen participation is very important. But that means then the citizens also need to be bold enough to want to participate in these sessions. So what do we do in scenarios where citizens just believe in what their leaders think, plan, and do? How do we deal with that scenario?
Yeah, it's a complex process, of course. It's not a short-term process. You have to give them the instruments, the skills to make possible for them to have a qualitative debate or participation in the public policies designing. It's key, but of course you need time. But if you are starting the process, the key element is to take into your mind that without citizenship engagement, no smart city is possible. There are cases of cities in the world with very easy access to technologies, to infrastructures, but we can say that they are not smart because really people doesn't feel that their quality of life in that city is high enough. In our case, for example, in Barcelona is a digital city, it's a digital capital, but in Barcelona also there is a high risk of digital exclusion because there are some suburbs, some districts of the city in which people really is not digitally skilled enough to participate into this kind of processes. So our responsibility as a public administration, as a smart public administration is to skill them, stay with them, and give them the empowerment, digital and cultural empowerment to make possible this interactive discussion. So for me, that's a key element. We share the vision also with Kigali City. In fact, we signed an agreement with Kigali City Council just to share this kind of methodologies to make possible this engagement.
Right, very important. Without the public participation, the process will not be complete. And it's the same here in this room. Without your participation, then this conversation is meaningless. I want to open the floor now. The microphones should be roving. So you given the mic, someone can help us give out the microphone. Or should I bring it? I can do that actually. So you'll just say your name and the institution or where you come from and your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Karim Kharat. I'm the CEO of BWS. BWS is a company providing integrated solution for the saving of water, energy, and fuel. So including solutions for smart cities. And I just wanted to share a small story and a question. When we have suggested to the Tunisian water company, national water company, to use our solutions, at first there was a lot of resistance. And they have barely accepted to implement the solution on 2 counters. And guess what? For these 2 counters, the loss, the leak, was much more higher than the price of the solution itself for several years. So the loss in 1 year was much more higher. So the acceptance is there now, but there is another question which is coming and that I want to share with you. What shall we do with all these people that were used to collect the information from the counters, or these guys that were employed in the buses to collect money? So we keep on saying that, yeah, you have to train them differently, you have to give them other opportunities, you have to, but frankly, there is a cost. I just want to you guys to share with us whether this there is really a cost or there is any other solution that we have not think about.
Thank you very much. Patrick, I'm sure all the conductors, those who used to collect the money, if they meet you today, you're one of their enemies, number one. Took away our jobs. I mean, what sort of alternative solution did you give, or what sort of advice would you give for people who want to do such a thing that involves displacement of people from their jobs, as he says? Talk to us about that.
Surely. So on almost every panel I sit on, I'm very assured that one of the people in the audience is definitely going to ask this question. And so with the case of our public transport conductors, of course, there were quite a number, almost close to 500. If you look at shifts, sometimes even more. So what we did was look at some that had a very good track record in terms of behavior, and try to retrain them to do other vacancies that we needed in our operations, and that is agents and our agent network. Of course, the agent network is not as big as the number of conductors, so there was definitely a certain percentage of loss of jobs. But as we expand to new markets and as we expand even with the intercity transport, we're trying to find avenues where we create jobs for almost all of them. So of course, as a startup in Kigali, we never had much room to retrain all these people to take on many other jobs. But now, as we've grown with a client base of close to 2 million, it gives us enough capacity to be able to say, okay, we need agents here, we need supervisors here, we need inspectors, we need technicians. So for those with a little bit of technical skills, we then retrain them to take on that. For those who managing a POS is very easy for anyone, so we train them to be able to do that. And some of these agents have grown to have a small business that even gets them even $1 million Rwandan francs, which if you convert to dollars, 1,500 a month, which is something.
Yeah. So Diba, I mean, why we talk about this, Lorenzo's mentioned earlier on about public participation. How do you ensure that when we mention smart cities, we are not making the public feel like this is a monster? It's going to take away our jobs. It's going to mess us up. How do you ensure that so that there's acceptance across all the boards?
I'd like to give a concrete answer to this gentleman. I mean, definitely related to water. I'm sure you know about what we call the coffee readings, right? Coffee readings for the audience. So that's you have meter readers. Instead of doing their work, they sit on a coffee and they put the index for the billing, right? So what we've done is that, and this is coming back to what our friend from Barcelona was saying again, what is the aim of implementing ultimately a smart solution and having a vision of a smart city? Because you have to have as well the utility, and when I say the utility, that's the people's, the staff, know why these solutions are going to be implemented. Most of the utilities, if you take the electric utilities or water, they are not profitable. So by having this solution, it is helping them to improve their operation cost. They are going to be more profitable. And guess what? Sometimes they can get incentive. So what we've done is that in many countries here in Africa, we've looked at the production ratio from basic readings to a smart metering. And the other guys who were no longer doing the readings has been, as they have done in Patrick's company, been affected to some other duties, and they understood it. But coming to your question, it's most about ultimately what is the objective of this. If people are perceiving that you are implementing solution for the smart cities to track them, to I would say nail them down, they will not accept it. But if they see it as a mean to improve their life, work, they will accept it easily in a certain way.
All right. Another question? Oh.
Hello, my name is Raymond Asimwe. A partner at Bytelex Advocates. We do work for tech startups and in energy and other sectors. My question is along finance. We've been lucky to see some of these deals or even worked on some of them. My thinking is that, especially if you're looking at smart cities, you're looking at a couple of different sectors, transport and so on and so forth. If you look at the technology side, most times you're going to have challenges with adoption. For instance, you just gave us an example. People don't want to adopt it. They are very skeptical. And then if you look at utilities, you have the broader issues of like energy, is the energy efficient and so on. So I just want to understand how investors are perceiving this that you guys are working on and what innovative financing approaches you've come up with. And then thirdly, how has structured finance been involved in assisting? By that I mean securitizing, receivables, doing things like ABS and so on. I just want to see if you've seen any models that might work for us based on the projects you've worked on before.
Anne, I'll give you the floor, Anne, because talking to us from the experience of Aecon Lighting Up Africa, I mean, you can share with us a bit of highlights on that question.
Yes, we can speak about that initiative. The aim was really to democratize access to clean energy across Africa and accelerate access to energy in Africa. That was the main purpose. We already had the vision of the smart village and the overall ecosystem, but the focus at the time was more on that. What I can say is that at the time, we've been tasting some approaches in terms of exploring opportunities for pre-financing, either from institutions or leveraging export credit schemes. And that proved to be pretty successful because there is a challenge in Africa with public authorities who do not have unlimited budget. And you have to, when you propose a project, if you don't anticipate the financing issues, you're just lost. It has to be part of the solution. What you plan, what you're going to deliver, with whom you're going to deliver, under which schedule, and what are the payment modalities. What do you do to help states, repaying progressively of this type of thing. So that was a kind of a test period. And now, for the smart village approach, I think there are many things around the B2B approach that can be further explored. You know, we can come back to some public financing, private financing, pre-financing. You know, we can use guarantees from banks. We have one of the founding member of the Gasca Alliance, which is JC2Co, which is a company, a global leader in advertisement. And basically what they do is to enhance urban landscape, but having some private players advertising and paying for that type of furniture. So this is a very interesting concept that can be adapted both to cities and to village at some point, and can also help promoting, you know, local brands and local activities in a way, you know, that is also relevant. So there are ways. I think it's more up to us as Africans to start thinking outside the box and outside what has been done to date. But definitely there are opportunities, and this is what we're looking at the moment.
Right. If we have anybody in the room who feels that we are always told that there are opportunities and we don't see them. I mean, any entrepreneur, young entrepreneur here, okay, you're young at heart, young at heart. Go ahead.
I'm not so young entrepreneur, but I'm from the other side, the academic side. I'm from the University of Rwanda. I'm saying I'm from the University of Rwanda. I'm a lecturer, and the other part of my job is I'm a director of IT governance at the university. So I heard about this topic since then. The concept of having a smart city, it might be different, quite different from Barcelona to India to Rwanda to whatever. So those silos, someone taking transport, another taking energy, another taking whatever. So it means I understand that it is grounded by either the high demand from the city councils or local government, so I'm not seeing the link between the demand and the academic part of it, which is the research. We are talking about the citizen engagement, the adoption. I don't feel that, yes, I can experience it because either there is a gap between the academia and the startup, but on the other way, the startup might come from the university, which I know that we are engaging into training the young boys and girls from the university and they have bright ideas. That I can assure you. There are more ideas, but there is still that gap. This question is not going to be asked here because I know it is something else, but when the research is coming in, maybe I can ask one of the young or the entrepreneurs there, how are you taking decisions if it is not grounded by a purely research? As well as we are talking about the citizen engagement, the adoption of technology, and so forth. So that will lead to another question, maybe for the tap and go. Patrick, yes. So how do you see yourself, not you as a person, but as a CEO of Tap and Go company in the next 5 years? What is the next boom in terms of transport in Rwanda? Thank you.
Patrick, take it away.
Thank you for that question. So in my conclusion, actually, I was going to talk about a certain component that we forgot when we were talking about smart cities, and that's the keeping our cities green and livable. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing, not just in Africa, but globally, actually. Elsewhere, it's even worse. And so AC Group as a company is looking at, three major pillars. One is how can we make transport seamless and convenient for everyone. And that's through making it comfortable, adding components like the Wi-Fi, which we talked about, which we've done in Rwanda, and we want to extend elsewhere, and have a reliable bus schedule. I know I'm leaving my office, I'm going to get to the bus stop 5 minutes, there will be a bus. So those are two of the immediate things that we're going to do right now. But then another component, which is what I talked about, which is being green, is we also this week, it's very memorable for us because we've just done a successful conversion of a bus from petrol and diesel to LPG gas. And LPG gas not only reduces their cost in terms of consumption by 40%, but it also reduces the emissions by 50%, which is remarkable, especially if we're looking at having more buses than personal vehicles. So you can imagine if we have a successful shift from more individual vehicles to more buses, and the buses that are on the road release half the emission they used to, that would be a very good contribution to have. But something else that we're looking at is having connected transport systems. We manage the bus. Another company, I don't know if some of you managed to use it, Move, is dealing with taxi. We have another one that's innovating around the motorcycles. So how can you have one platform that connects all these? If I'm moving from KCC, the Radisson, all the way to my home, I can be able to use 3 modes of transport and all of them seamless on one click. So on a single click, I have a Move taking me from here to the bus stop. From there, I get on a bus to the road that just diverts off to my home, and from there, I find a motorcycle waiting for me. So that is what we want to get to from next year, moving forward. And of course, you cannot live without talking about autonomous vehicles. That means private vehicles and buses. So those are some of our projects that we're looking at in our 5-year strategy as a company. Thank you.
Right. We have 2 questions, and then we start wrapping up.
Thank you very much. I'm Mugatera Antoine. I'm a student at UR, University of Rwanda. I want anyone view on my worries of when talking of smart city, particularly this is smart transportation. It seems we are jumping into a long journey of European countries, which since 80s was even an initiative of AU for Sweden or the Barcelona, for that one to happen. And we want to jump into it now, while it cost them since that time. And the last one is, how about, he has said of citizen participation, and how our citizens are digital literate to participate in this smart transportation, or we will just be forcibly join, and these entrepreneurs will be dealing with policymakers, and those policymakers are not even part of our daily transportation, I mean in public transport. Thank you.
Very good questions. I think, are we rushing? And why are we leaving out others? Yet the SDG says, leave no one behind. Go ahead, since you have the mic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't totally agree with what the gentleman is saying, because I think we Africa, and that's where we have to be passionate as well about what we want to do with these smart cities. Europe has done its way, all along the way, but they have reached a level where we shouldn't be starting from the beginning. Because if we take the same assumption, we would be sending birds instead of having the GSM, right? So what we should be ensuring, at our level, is just to be sure that whatever smart city we're building in Africa is also keeping our real African identity, like Eugene said at the very beginning. But out of that, we definitely, it's an interconnected world. What we're going to build as a smart village in the north of Senegal will be replicable at a certain point because that temperature-wise would be similar in Rwanda. So by having the right ecosystem, you should be able, and also something we forgot to mention here, on that ecosystem, it doesn't mean only the companies outside of Africa. There are companies inside Africa, you know, which are doing a good job, which should be integrated in it, right?
All right, thank you very much. We have a question here, actually two. Make it as brief as you can.
Okay, I'll be brief. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Usiri, and I'm a young entrepreneur, since you were looking for young entrepreneurs. I have a question for, I think, Eric, who works on IoT solutions, as well as, sorry, I don't know your name, brother, but you track buses in the city. So when I think about sort of IoT and sort of getting sort of visibility, which is what it gives you into what's going on, right? So you're tracking things, you're collecting all this data. Having tried to push businesses like that in Tanzania, which is where I'm from, I've seen a lot of pushback, because when you bring visibility, what you're doing is you're shining a light, right? And there are a lot of people that thrive in the darkness. Trying to be euphemistic here, you get your fear. I hope you understand what I mean. So people push back, and it's been hard when you sort of sales cycles to sell IoT solutions to businesses until you reach sort of like the CFO or somebody higher up who's sort of losing the money from that darkness, which is like fraud and things like that. So how do you think about selling your IoT solutions to businesses, small and big? Yeah, exactly.
I'll go straight forward. Today, you don't sell IoT solution to small business. You sell IoT solution to big business, and you sell it to the CXO, Chief Manufacturing Officer, Chief Sales Officer, CEO, CIO. There is no there is no IoT for small business today. I'm not talking about the IoT going to consumer, okay, which is completely different, okay. Fitbit and so on, it's a specific way to market, channel to market, go to market, and it's also specific devices, okay, because the corporate devices have also little to do with consumer devices, especially in terms of warranties, in terms of lifetime in the field, and so on. So today, no, sorry, there is only IoT for big business, and you capture that, and the rest will follow. Why only for big business? Why? Because it is costly. It costs you as much money to sell 1,000 devices on a solution as to sell 100,000 devices on a solution. So if I can take the example of a city near Delhi, which is Noida, we sold 75,000 connected lamps. When you have done that 2 times, 3 times, and actually we have done Noida, Calcutta, Jamshedpur, you can go to lower city because you have depreciated a lot of your R&D. You have learned also, okay, we learn a lot, you know, about how behaves the grid in India, which has nothing to do, it behaves in US or in Europe, okay? Sometimes we get voltage up to 440 volt, and the devices you have to resist to that, okay? And if you take any device coming from China or coming from Europe, none of them can work just because of that. So you have to sell to those big business, you get big volume, and the concept of big volume is relative. There are business where 3,000, 4,000 is a big volume, but don't target small at the beginning. It's not true. You have to target big, and when it's done, then you can go small.
All right, one last question here.
Hello, my name is Jose Reis from Angola. My question is regarding on decision making. As entrepreneurs, how do you guys see the relationship between the people that does the policy? They are not experts on the technology that you guys promoting, and how is there's an issue to progress your, let's say, for example, a product like Tap and Go? How do you deal with the lack of understanding of future technology regarding transport, for example, in Rwanda or in any other country that you've been operating? Thank you.
So I'll be brief because Anne also has a comment. So I think with our expansion to the rest of Africa, this is a very big problem. It's one of the biggest challenges that we faced, where you're talking about something that could ultimately change a city and how behavior of people, movement of people, and congestion of vehicles. But you meet someone that, the moment you say technology, that's the end of the conversation. But again, when you're selling these solutions, you're not selling the technology. You're selling the end product. This is what it's going to change. This is what is going to change. And it also helps when there is some kind of funding coming from the private sector. Many a times you find smart city solutions from private companies are coming as a cost to government. And that becomes a whole new different conversation, which ties in with one of the questions that was asked. How can we figure out more innovative ways of funding smart city solutions? Because if the funding is coming from the private sector, then you have a part of the listening ear. And if you can add on the benefits and use cases that are going to be there now, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, then you have an argument that you can pass ahead, which has helped us as a company to expand all through here and Cameroon and another market that we're launching.
Yes, Anne, you can also go ahead.
Yes, briefly, thank you. Thank you, Eugene and Patrick. No, on that point, it's true that there's an issue in terms of capacity and understanding, and I think there's also a commitment from the private sector to help, the civil servants, the decision maker, make informed decision, which is not about doing hard sell, hard lobbying, but giving them options. That is very critical. At ADS, we're working on some projects designed to offer training, digital literacy training, to some civil servants in Western African countries that are in charge of the digital transition. So we're working on this. This is really factored, and we concur with you on the analysis. Now, the point is about creating incentives also for this project. So it's about showing, the change, but there can be some very practical incentives. If we're thinking, for instance, about some government services or basic administrative and payment services managed by public authorities like water, electricity, etc., then the solutions that can be provided in smart cities and smart villages, it's about easier payment, M-payment, for instance, provided to citizens, to the community, and it creates revenue insurance, for the public authorities. And that's a big incentive to say, okay, we see we're going to collect also a bit of money from that. It will be better than before, because for now it's very complicated, and we do have to ensure that at some point these services are covered financially. So it helps shifting the mindset. But the key, for sure, is also about the commitment of the private sector and the private sector funding. And this is an important comment. The model on that, I'm especially thinking about a smart village. It cannot be fully B2C, because the people are just, first, they need to understand the value of what can be brought to them, and then they need to be able, to cover this cost, as Eric was describing at the beginning, which means that you need time to create opportunities, the productive use of everything we're talking about, so that people generate revenues and are self-sustained, and then start, to be part of the financial conversation on that. But it cannot be at the very beginning. So the key thing on all these projects and to deliver is about that mindset, like bringing people who are ready to commit on a longer period until people are in a position also to be part of the financial conversation. When I say people ready to commit, I mean private player, financing institution, etc., that are ready to accept to bear some of the initial cost for a few years until the impact is tangible in terms of the economic life and standards of the people, and things are changing. And then we have B2G, 2B, 2C model. This is what we're looking at eventually, but we have to be realistic. At the beginning, is the one who have the capacity and the financial capacity that are going to make the difference and to initiate, which will hopefully be a positive change.
Right. Allow me now to take the final concluding remarks from our panelists, and I'll start with you, Lorenzo. And as you give your closing remarks, I want you to share with us what you think is or are the biggest misconceptions about smart cities that we need to demystify. And as you go back home from this particular summit, what would be the key takeaway points that you'd be taking as far as this specific topic is concerned?
Maybe the first topic I would like to remark is that technology is not everything when we are talking about smart city, but also the key element of public-private participation, public-private partnership. A lot of question about it, a lot of question about financial aspect, and it is true. I think that it's really helpful to have a framework that makes possible to do this, because sometimes, as the last person made the question, sometimes public administration doesn't know how to do something. Sometimes you perfectly know what you want to do, but not how to do it. In that way, the participation of private innovative potential, big companies, entrepreneurship, it's key to really achieve the best solution, even when the decision doesn't really know exactly what to do. So I think that today this reality has emerged with power, and I think it's my remark for today.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anne Elver, you can also share with us biggest misconception about smart cities and your take home.
So I agree, it's not only about technology, and it's not only about replicability. That's very important. Some of the essential features are replicable, but not everything. And even when we're talking about replicability, we can be in very different environment, whether in terms of creating the infrastructure, or whether things are being managed, usually are people ready to let private players, enter that type of essential services or not? You have to factor all this. So there's no one size fits all. That's very, very important, because people tend to think, okay, we think smart cities and smart village, and we have a concept and we lay this out, and it's much more complex. That's fine. So now in terms of takeaway, I think this is a conviction we already have at ADS, but there's a lot of creativity, skills, talents, and innovative solutions already successfully tasted in Africa. And we have to ensure that we bring the African players at startups, SME level, scaling up companies level, also as part of that conversation. Because ultimately, what are we talking about? We're talking about creating, implementing these ecosystems. And we're talking about developing a new type of model out of the rural areas, basically unlocking them. And this is something, if we are collectively successful as Africans, that can be exported, And that's very interesting. We should not forget that we're creating opportunities for each of the community, but also for the continent as a whole. And that is also, I think, an exciting goal to have and keep in mind.
Right. Thank you so much, Patrick. I'll give you the floor, but also an opportunity for someone who asked a question on the importance of research when you're making your decisions as a solution provider. What informs you that people want 4G and not 3G while you're providing the internet in the buses?
All right, I wasn't ready for that, but first I would like to talk about the aspect of education, especially with the smart cities that and smart city solutions that we're deploying. Every now and then we're deploying solutions, some built within African countries, some brought from outside. But to sustain this, we'll also need to look at education. We'll need to look at being creative, teaching creativity and critical thinking. because you can't train people for the challenges of the future, because we don't know what challenges those will be. We need to train people to be critical and to be creative around, finding innovative solutions around problems. But coming back to that question of how do you research around what people need, there's a very interesting quote. There's always questions around who actually said it, when the first vehicle was made, there was a question around, if they had asked people what they needed to move faster, they would say we need faster horses. They didn't imagine that there was a vehicle that could be made. So sometimes you don't have to ask, sometimes you have to think. But the most important thing you need to put forward is that if I'm bringing something to the market, how could I put it there as quickly as possible, and then iterate as I move along. Understand what parts of it are important, what parts of it are not necessary, and then just keep changing it and adjusting it until you have a product that everyone loves. And so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Sound, mic, please. Yeah, okay. Diba, it's actually your time now. Share with us your thoughts, especially because we've been told the biggest misconception is that smart cities have to always be about technology. We've also been told that it's not about replicability. What's your take home? What is the biggest misconception in your opinion?
For me, there are four main points. First of all, if you look at it in a certain way, we are in a period of a revolution. During the 18th century, you had the Industrial Revolution. The year 2000, you had the internet. And now we are in the period of the digital, with all it comes with. So if you look at it as far as you can see, look at it, I mean, innovation has always been made to make people's life better. And in our conception, in ITRON, what we're thinking about smart city is that we are enablers of dreams coming true for the social and economical improvement of people's life. What does that mean? In a city, people have to have water. Once the infrastructure is there, how do they do to get the water? They need to have electricity. They need to have internet. And what we are trying to do is to bring a kind of multi-applicational canopy where you can have the street light, where you can have the security, where you can have Patrick's application available, and people will be interacting with it. However, we need to keep again our authenticity as an African. We don't want to be, I like Barcelona, but we don't want to be Barcelonas, right? Yeah. We want to remain Kigalis. And the last point for me is that people don't have to be afraid of it. Yeah. And
so you should not be afraid of being Barcelona.
No, we should, unless they have Real de Madrid in front of them, but that's another subject. The point is, this is going to happen in any ways. So better have the politics, the city stakeholders, the private companies, and also the citizen, be all involved to try to define exactly what is the aim of doing this. And taking it from there, you build a resilient and also accountable ecosystem which is going to deliver it.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Eric, your thoughts on this particular situation that we are talking about right now. We all have to remain authentic, but we want to be also smart at the same time. How do we do this? And your takeaway for this session?
So I think one misconception is one size fits all. I don't think it's true. Every city has to find the way, and every city has to find its low-hanging fruit. It will harvest quickly, okay? Because it will start. And the second point is, it's a long journey. It's a 10 years journey. Because application after application, you're going to create a database that will become open, that will open to your local entrepreneur, that will create your application, and this is how you start the virtual cycle.
Right, thank you. That was brief and to the point. I want to say thank you to our panelists who have actually been very generous with their thoughts on this very significant conversation. I want to pick up from what Lorenzo said. Citizen participation is a very significant aspect in this process. And so don't sit back and wait. You have to take the initiative. If your roads do not have pedestrian walks, it is actually your right to actually ask for them. And so with those remarks, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I would like to request you to give a smart round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. We can release you as well as you go. And I don't know the next item in the agenda, but of course I think we are free to move on. I'll just allow our facilitator to take the microphone. But as always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Thank you for being a part of the conversation.